Ever heard a prediction so bold, it makes you stop and go, wait a minute. Is this person seeing something everybody else is missing?
Like they've got some kind of inside scoop or something?
Exactly. Yeah, like a glimpse into the future or something.
Yeah.
That's how I felt reading this piece from the Motley Fool about natural gas. It's all about Richard Kinder, the co-founder of Kinder Morgan.
Yeah.
And he's basically saying he's never seen a better time to invest in natural gas infrastructure. And we're talking about a guy who's been a major player in energy for decades.
That's a bold statement, especially coming from someone like him. I mean, this isn't just some analyst. This is Richard Kinder.
Right. So today we're diving deep into why Kinder Morgan, one of the biggest names in natural gas pipelines, is so incredibly bullish on this industry.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
To give you an idea of the scale, we're talking about a company with a 60,000-mile pipeline network.
60,000?
Yeah. Moving 40% of all the natural gas produced in the U.S.
Wow.
And their storage capacity.
Right.
Forget about it. 702 billion cubic feet. That's 15% of the entire country's capacity. So when these guys make a move, everybody pays attention.
Yeah, it's like they're the circulatory system of the entire natural gas industry in America. When they say they're seeing a surge, something big's happening.
No doubt. So Richard Kinder, he lays out three main reasons for his super optimistic outlook. And these have been on the radar for a while. More LNG exports, growing demand for natural gas down in Mexico, and natural gas becoming even more important for generating electricity.
Right. Makes sense.
Just those factors alone. Kinder says could bump up demand by 20 billion cubic feet per day by 2030.
20 billion? That's huge. What is that, like almost a 20% jump from where we are now?
Try almost 20%.
Yeah.
So yeah, pretty massive. But here's the thing. Kinder doesn't stop there. He throws in this whole other curveball, a brand new factor that's growing incredibly fast.
Okay, now you've got me really curious. What's this curveball he's talking about?
You ready for this? It's the AI and data center explosion.
Oh, wow, yeah. You're right, I hadn't even thought about that. But the amount of energy those things must use is mind-blowing.
Totally. But is it really enough to justify this level of excitement around natural gas? That's the big question, right?
Yeah, good point. We're talking about a whole lot of hype and speculation. So is there really substance behind it all?
Well, according to Kinder Morgan, this new wave of data centers, all driven by the insane demand for AI, could add another 3 to 6 billion cubic feet a day to natural gas demand.
Okay, so not insignificant, but on top of everything else we talked about.
And that's just their conservative estimate. The potential is there for it to go way beyond that, even up to 10 billion cubic feet.
Wow. So we really could be talking about a demand surge unlike anything we've ever seen.
That's exactly what makes this whole thing so fascinating. We're talking about a potential energy revolution driven by our insatiable need for data and computing power. And all of that requires a whole lot of natural gas to keep the lights on, literally.
It's like all these different forces are converging at the same time, creating this perfect storm in the energy market. And at the center of it all is natural gas.
And potentially Kinder Morgan.
Yeah, exactly. They seem to be betting big on natural gas and this perfect storm you're talking about.
So the question is, are they right? Are we on the cusp of a natural gas boom? Or is this just a lot of hot air? It's really mind-boggling when you think about how much energy goes into powering our digital lives.
Yeah.
But isn't this a huge gamble for Kinder Morgan? Like, what if these projections are way off? What if this whole thing is just hype?
That's a really good question, and it's definitely a risk. But, Kinder Morgan isn't exactly known for making reckless moves.
Sure.
They're already breaking ground on projects specifically designed to handle this expected surge in demand.
Oh, wow. So they're putting their money where their mouth is.
Exactly.
So tell me more about these projects. What kind of scale are we talking about here?
Well, they've got some pretty massive ones in the works. Like, there's this thing called the South System Expansion 4 project. It's a $3 billion investment.
$3 billion with a B.
Yeah, $3 billion to increase their pipeline capacity in the southeast U.S. That whole region is seeing massive population growth right now.
Right.
And then there's the GCX system expansion in Texas, which is strategically placed to handle all the increasing gas production coming out of the Permian Basin.
Okay, so those are some seriously big investments. But how can they be sure these projects will actually be profitable? I mean, are they just hoping for the best here?
That's the interesting part. Both the South System expansion and that GCX expansion I mentioned, they're both backed by long-term contracts.
Oh, really?
With companies that are basically lining up to lock in their access to this new pipeline capacity.
Wow. So it's not just Kinder Morgan that's feeling good about the future of natural gas.
Right. It seems like a whole lot of major players in the energy industry are seeing the same thing.
Makes sense. If you're going to bet billions of dollars on something, you better be pretty darn sure it's going to pay off. So we've heard from Richard Kinder, but what about the rest of the leadership at Kinder Morgan? Are they all in on this whole natural gas vision?
Yeah, it's not just him. We actually have some really interesting insights from their CEO, Kim Dang.
Okay.
And she actually paints an even more extreme picture of this demand surge.
More extreme?
Yeah, she basically said the conversations they're having now are way more intense than they were even just a few months ago.
Wow, even more bullish than they expected.
Yeah.
Interesting. What's behind that increased confidence?
Well, she points to several things that seem to be happening all at once. Like, for one, she talked about how population shifts within the U.S. are putting a ton of pressure on existing energy infrastructure, especially the growth in the Sun Belt.
That's wild how something like where people choose to live can have such a huge impact on the entire energy landscape.
I know, right? But it's not just about people moving. Dang also mentioned how government initiatives, like that whole CHIPS Act that's supposed to boost domestic manufacturing, are also pushing up the need for energy. And we can't forget about the big push for renewables like solar and wind power.
But wouldn't more renewables actually mean less demand for natural gas?
You would think so, right? But it's not that simple. Renewables are awesome, but they're not always reliable. The sun's not always shining. The wind's not always blowing.
Right.
So we still need a really reliable backup power source. And that's where natural gas comes in. It's like the reliable sidekick, always there to keep the lights on when we need it most.
Makes sense. So even as we transition to cleaner energy sources, it seems like natural gas will still have a really important role to play.
Exactly. And then, of course, there are those energy-hungry data centers we talked about earlier.
Right.
Dane reiterated that the demand from data centers is going through the roof, and it's only going to get more intense as we rely more and more on data storage and processing.
So we've got population shifts,
Right.
government initiatives, a huge push for renewables, and this explosion of data centers all pointing toward the same thing.
It's like a perfect storm brewing, and it's
Yeah.
all creating this massive demand for natural gas.
So how is Kinder Morgan planning on tackling this huge opportunity? Are they going all in on these mega projects, or are they diversifying their approach a bit?
Well, it sounds like they're taking a pretty smart approach.
Sounds like they're playing it smart by diversifying their portfolio.
Yeah, they're not putting all their eggs in one basket, that's for sure.
So they're going after the big projects, but also making smaller, more strategic moves to keep that revenue flowing.
Exactly. It's like a two-pronged approach.
Right.
They're capitalizing on those immediate needs in the market, but also positioning themselves for the long game.
This all sounds incredibly promising, but I gotta ask, are there any downsides here? Any risks we should be thinking about? It seems like every time I turn on the news, somebody's talking about how volatile the energy sector is.
Oh, absolutely. That's a really important point.
Right.
And honestly, it's something any smart investor should be thinking about carefully.
Right.
We've talked about a lot of potential upsides here, but it's not all sunshine and rainbows.
Right.
Like, one thing to consider is this whole push for clean energy it's gaining a ton of momentum. And even though natural gas is often seen as that bridge fuel to a cleaner future, there's always that chance that technology or even just regulations could speed things up faster than we expect.
So that bridge might be a lot shorter than some people think.
Exactly. And then there's the whole environmental impact of natural gas.
Right.
It's definitely cleaner than coal, but there's still that issue of methane leaks during production and transportation, which obviously contributes to greenhouse gases. And that's something Kinder Morgan and the whole industry really need to tackle.
For sure.
And of course, you can't forget about geopolitics.
Right. Always a wild card.
Always. Global energy markets are so interconnected and easily disrupted by, political instability or conflicts. And that can definitely impact demand and prices down the line.
So it seems like there's a lot of potential with natural gas, but also a lot of uncertainty.
Exactly. It's like navigating a minefield. But, this deep dive has given us a lot to think about, right? And it seems pretty clear that natural gas is going to remain a major player in the energy scene for a while.
For sure. So for our listeners who are now super interested in this whole natural gas situation, what's the main takeaway here? Should we all be calling our brokers and buying up Kinder Morgan's stock?
Whoa, hold on there. Remember, we're not giving financial advice here, just trying to break down the information and lay out the facts. But I think this deep dive has shown there are definitely some interesting opportunities in natural gas. But you got to do your research and understand the risks. We've talked about a lot of those today.
For sure.
The energy landscape is constantly changing, so stay informed, stay curious, and who knows, maybe we'll revisit this whole natural gas thing again down the road.
That's a great place to wrap things up. Stay curious, everyone, and we'll catch you next time for another deep dive.